Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to catch you up with, yes, a bunch of news. Probably wasn't expecting that considering we're in an elite specialization weekend. It's Tuesday, not Monday Fun Day, as we said yesterday. Apparently Day 9 has that. We can't say that, but we can have Gloom Day Tuesday, where there's never any news, but occasionally a patch in-game. So that's what we're going to be talking about. There was a patch. There was some news last week based on lore side things, namely the Mordrem Guard. There was a point of interest to discuss, and ArenaNet took the time last night, or the middle of the night for my time zone anyway, to discuss the changes that will be going to the Elite Specializations for Beta Weekend Event 3. By the way, my general prediction right now is that we're going to have the Forge this week, we're going to have the Druid the week after that, and then probably Beta Weekend Event 3 following that, and that leads us very close into the actual given release date. So to talk very quickly about the patch, this is a fairly large patch, but actually considering what changed in-game, not too much. There was a bug in PvP, actually, as I was originally capturing footage that you're seeing right now. We were having fatal errors where everyone would crash out of the game, and it was basically who would win was the team that had the most people with SSDs, so they could load in faster. But there have been, though they've been more mechanical tweaks, some rather big changes, and first to discuss is the death of the Black Lion chest key farm. I mentioned this recently, a couple of weeks ago, when I did a video about the status of the channel, and one of the videos that's been absolutely huge for me was when I did a guide on how to Black Lion chest key farm. I honestly don't think it's that widespread, but this was a massive video I'd done. It was a staple or way of getting money, kind of a high RNG method of earning cash if you didn't mind like highly grindy stuff or very specialized gameplay. I thought it had a place in the game, but maybe because of the free-to-play accounts or some other reason I really can't put my finger on, they've now nerfed it. Black Lion chest keys from the early personal story rewards, because there are chest keys that come from later personal story rewards as well, have been limited to 1 per week, account-wide. So they haven't killed it completely. I guess when you do that story for the second time, I haven't verified this, that you just won't get a key at all and you'll miss that reward, you'll just get your 50 luck. But that's kind of sad to me because I really didn't think it was totally breaking the game. But at the same time, maybe they just want the Black Lion chest to have that little bit more value. Maybe they're making space now for some other more exciting or different items that can come out of the Black Lion chests. And they wanted to curb, you know, the main way that people are getting keys here. Maybe they just frankly don't like the thought of people getting keys so easily in-game and want more of us to resort to, oh yeah, buying gems. With the nerf did come a small silver lining, and they say that they've increased the drop rate of both the keys and the chests. I don't know why they're increasing the drop rate on the chests. They're still very undervalued. I think, in general, as a business, they do much better if the chests themselves were a little bit rarer, because with rarer chests, people will get that, oh my god, I just got a Black Lion chest experience, and then actually maybe consider buying a key instead of just TPing it for nothing because they know they're going to get 1,000 on their way to level 80 anyway. They did seem to lower the chest rate a while ago because the price has slowly been raising on the TP, but now it looks like they're putting it back up. But of course, the important one there is Black Lion chest keys themselves are going up. I've had maybe 5 of these drop my entire time playing the game. That's about 7,000 hours in this game. And though I think it's slightly higher than a precursor, which I've never had, it is very, very low, and I wonder what they would have moved it to now. You'll note that they didn't spend the time to say, oh, we've doubled the rate of Black Lion key drops, because at the end of the day, when it's 0.00001, doubling it to 0.00002 really doesn't make much of a real-world difference now, does it? Camera controls have been upgraded. You can see me using them in this video. They've given greater precision to the camera precision sliders in general. They have adjusted some of the default camera positions when you use the checkbox that adjusts your camera height to character height. And so this is actually quite nice. On the stream very recently we were playing a Norn character and the height of the camera was just completely off, and I had to fiddle around that box until it eventually turned on. These are weird things you don't really realize affect those new accounts, and obviously there are a lot of them being created at the moment. And probably the biggest one, there's a new slider as well. There was a vertical position slider before, which has now been renamed to vertical position far, and we've got a new one called vertical position near. And you'll see the effects of that in the footage. Moving over to the item side of things, they upgraded the Laurel vendors, who now offer the new item and experience boosters for 1 Laurel. So you can get an hour's worth of those buffs. These are incredibly potent buffs. On the stream just yesterday, I believe in a period of about half an hour, let's be generous, about half an hour, we got something like 9 levels just from auto-attacking stuff underwater. Yeah, that we had a Zerg with us and most people won't have that advantage, but it does demonstrate what an insane boost those things can really offer on the experience front at the very least. So there you go, that's the patch. There's nothing really else to say. Warhorn sounds got changed again, but they seem to be going through a lot of iterations at the moment. Let's move over to the official forums and the devs talking about the elite specialization balance coming in. Now, there is a vast amount of information here, and what I'll do is I will link you guys to the profession section of the forums, so you can look through yourself if I don't talk now, which I'm probably not going to, about your favored elite specialization, but here's a couple of the things that really stood out to me. I went on maybe a 20-minute long rant today, again on the stream, about the skill Rebound on the Tempest. Rebound is the elite that this Stormbringer supposedly brings, and was a very weirdly placed elite that neither fit the class's theme very well, nor worked very well. Essentially what it did was you activate, and then supposedly the next ability you and your allies use cools down 25% faster. That was an exciting prospect, but it was being wasted on auto attacks. Sometimes it just wouldn't pro. It was just bad. It was buggy. And at the end of the day, it stepped on the Chronomancer's toes and Alacrity, and it just didn't have much synergy with anything else build-wise that the Tempest offered, or theme-wise that the Tempest offered. Well, the skill has been changed. It's been changed to something that I probably will play with, and it's become much more of a heavy kind of healing, elementalist support style skill here. But I would still contest that it has nothing to do with the Tempest and doesn't belong where it is. It seems to me that ArenaNet realized that their original implementation of Rebound didn't work, but they'd invented the name for the skill, and they developed a skill tooltip, and they even had voice acting work go into it, and they didn't, have the time or the inclination to work on something else. So they confined themselves to this purely cosmetic idea of a skill called Rebound for their elite, and working in those confinements, they came up with a completely arbitrary new effect that has a little more combat application. This frustrates the hell out of me. I want, on a Storm-bringing Tempest class, them to actually stick with the theme and realize what the hell they want this elite specialization to do. Everything about it feels lukewarm to me, but to describe the effect, at last, what it does is it's kind of like Engineer's AED, or Guild Wars 1's Monk's Divine Intervention. What this means is you pop it, and on yourself and all your allies, the next time you would take fatal damage, instead of dying, you are instead healed for a certain amount of health. So it's a buff that will last on you for 5 seconds. If you don't die during those 5 seconds, there'll be no heal, right? So there is counterplay to it, and I kind of like that kind of gameplay. There's a small benefit as well. If the fatal damage part doesn't proc on Rebound, then it will apply one of the Elementalist auras, so it's got more of this auramancing stuff at play, which kind of ties it into the Tempest there. And it's a fun idea. Like, I can definitely see, using this intelligently in your raid group to stand in some kind of massive kill shot that you were supposed to move out of, a big telegraph that should have wiped your entire team, but you used Rebound and you survived. It seems to kind of scale okay with healing power, probably a little bit too weakly, but combined with all of the other stuff that Elementalists have available to heal, and Benevolence, namely, you can probably get like a 6k, 7k heal out on all your allies around you if they would die, which is actually fairly reasonable. That's not the only change to the Tempest, but honestly, they didn't seem to look at it very much. The biggest change is that we now have a trait that allows us to gain stability on Overload, sorely needed, and the Overload on Earth break bar no longer exists, so that ties me a little bit into the Revenant here. I believe Roy talked about this. Originally, there was a break bar on the Herald spec when you wielded a shield. It was kind of explained that break bars really were working very well on PvE mobs, but they just weren't working very well on players. So they've removed the break bars entirely from all elite specializations, including the Revenant and wherever else we had seen them. And now, a lot of those abilities are just giving us stability instead. Big change, fundamental change to the Revenant. They had a mechanic that was Displace. So Malik's got a Displace. They had Displace on their downstate skill 2, and this teleported a foe away from you. Unfortunately, though they liked the idea, it was breaking a lot of different things in the game, unfixably so, it would seem. And Displace now no longer exists on the Revenant. The downstate 2 is now a knockback, which does still leave it kind of unique because it's a single target knockback, and it goes further than the Guardian's downstate 2 skill, so it is kind of fairly unique for the downstate, but not as cool as the Displaces once upon a time were. Also, there was a huge change to Malik's. Malik's was an interesting legend that you could channel because it was based around this idea of the more condies on you, the more you can utilize them and pulse them out and do interesting things. It was kind of like a Corruption Necro done a little bit differently and perhaps a little bit better, and this really attracted a lot of people to Malik's. But ArenaNet kind of said they didn't like the fact that if you were playing in a large group, you had allies that were cleansing your condies, and you didn't want your condies cleansed. You want to, copy them back over with Malik's to foes. And they said that this really wasn't that fun. It was causing frustrations between players, and we all know how scared they are of that kind of thing. Rightfully so, I would say. So they ended up just completely changing Malik's. And I think what they changed it to generally doesn't look that exciting, but we'll have to see what goes on there. Two main classes, I think, that have had good balance and people generally really well received were the Berserker and the Reaper. Absolutely, the Reaper. People are really on that hype train. Reaper didn't actually have insane changes. It just had, like, small quality of life and tune-ups to the way that the Greatsword worked and some of the abilities that were missing a little. Death's Charge now moves you faster and some slight trait changes. Of course, at times like this, it's always sad to think about the fact that the last two elite specializations for the Engineer and the Ranger won't get this lovely iterative feedback process. But I will say, across all responses, this is my last note on this topic, about the devs, this has been fantastic to see. It's really cool to see the devs talk about the changes that are coming and then specifically reference, hey, this is because this is what you guys asked for. We are looking at what the community said. This beta is being treated as a proper beta, and here, you directly affected this. Revenant is getting a new, like, animation effect on its dodge roll, specifically because players were like, oh, this is a cool idea. The devs agreed, and they added it. That is the perfect kind of response I want to see from the devs much more frequently, not just when we're in a beta, and not just from profession-balanced devs, but, you know, across the board. This was really cool. Probably the best example I've seen of this since Guild Wars 2's launched, in all honesty, since the game's launched. It's brilliant. Okay, let's move on to some lore before we then talk a little bit about the Forge, which had a leak. And this relates to information that was revealed to us last weekend, obviously when the Mordrem stuff was going on in-game and there was a lot of distractions. We had a blog post revealed on the Mordrem Guard enemy type, and then Ruby and Leah Hoyer discussed it further on points of interest. Now, I'm going to talk about points of interest first, and then we'll talk about what the blog post goes over, because honestly, I feel like the blog post says more than Leah did on POI. So who is Leah? She is, she's a recent hire-ish, in my mind anyway, I sort of still see her this way. But she came on, she's kind of like the narrative director. She makes sure that all the pieces of the company are moving from, you know, getting VO in. She talked about sitting in on the booth while people are recording lines, to actually figuring out where the story is going and getting the lines together, and just the general direction and story management of Guild Wars 2. And so she came on to talk about the Mordrem Guard. All right, so who are the Mordrem Guard? The Mordrem Guard is the name for the minions of Mordremoth, who are specifically Sylvari that have listened to his call and turned to fight against the Pact, the Pale Tree, and so on. They are the Sylvari that have listened to that little nagging voice of Mordremoth in their head for long enough and caved. And now, while they may retain all their previous intelligence and understanding about the world, their minds are not entirely their own, and they have fallen. They have heeded the call. And when this happens, they change physically. They change to be less soft and leafy and planty, to be a lot more barky, and they get thicker skin, and, you know, they get more armored, and that's the idea there is, you know, they look more menacing, and obviously they're going to be harder to kill. I kind of like the idea that we already had kind of more entish, barky-looking Sylvari in the first place. Like, I've made some myself on my account, and so it's kind of cool to think that now that there's all this racism and fear that Sylvari are going to turn, those, like, rougher-looking Sylvari, who nonetheless are sound of mind, you know, get a lot more crap thrown at them just because people are thinking that they're going to change. I don't know, that's a nice little touch to me. So these guys specifically are the Sylvari who have turned, but that does not make them Nightmare Corps. So in the original blog post on the website, the Nightmare Corps weren't mentioned at all. Turns out last week I touched on this topic in my random lore video, and I specifically mentioned that while the Nightmare Corps have been fighting against the Pale Tree, and, you know, as far as the game gives us the story, tend to be just seen by players as these evil guys, right? You might expect that they would immediately listen to Mordremoth and they'd go off and follow Mordremoth, but that's not actually true. What the Nightmare Corps truly are fighting for is freedom to kind of make their own decisions, to be free of the yoke of the Ventari tablet, and they're not necessarily going to like the idea of exchanging one master, you know, the Pale Tree, for another, Mordremoth. And I expressed last week in that video that I was really hoping it was going to remain nuanced like that they weren't just going to have the Nightmare Corps become Mordrem Guard, that there would be some more dynamic to that. And, you know, we can have the story with Foul Lane and high-ranking Nightmare Courtiers actually have an interesting place in the story. And I, to my discredit, did doubt ArenaNet, and I said, you know what, they're probably just going to do a really boring, stupid story where all the Nightmare Corps just end up evil. I was wrong. Leah specifically came onto this POI and said, yeah, a lot of people have been asking this. No, the Nightmare Court don't just turn and become Mordrem Guard. It's totally possible for a member of the Nightmare Court to become Mordrem Guard. Don't get her wrong, but that is not the entire story. And hopefully we will see something cool. This idea of a temporary alliance with the Nightmare Court and Foul Lane to fight against the Mordrem could happen. They could put Kaith and Foul Lane on the same side again and, you know, a rekindle of their love. Ah, wouldn't that be wonderful? I don't know. We'll see. But I was very happy to hear about this fact. And specifically, Leah even said, you know, some high-ranking Nightmare Courtiers do have a prominent part in the story here on the live stream. A couple of other things about the Mordrem Guard too. we hear more about how Mordrem generates minions. And so when because a Mordrem Guard is going to be smarter, basically, than like a Mordrem Wolf or whatever else he corrupts for himself, he can have the Mordrem Guard do more advanced tasks for him, like gather bodies of the deceased. And what Mordremoth will do, Zaitan would just take those bodies and turn them immediately into his minions. But what Mordremoth does is he takes the bodies and he clones the body. And so when he generates a minion out of that body, you can kill that minion and he'll just clone another one. And you kill that minion and he just clones another one, and clones another one, and clones another. And Leah specifically mentioned that Mordremoth is very good at generating his armies. And this is different to Zaitan. Zaitan had a limited supply of the bodies, in theory. So this is kind of interesting. It's like an exponential scale of what Mordremoth can do. That's a cool comparison we can make that make this expansion feel a little bit more threatening, or like, a different question as to how we can actually breach this Elder Dragon's armies and slay him. And even in the beta, we did see this dialogue already, and there's kind of this dark undertone to it now, where if you are fighting alongside the Pact, and someone dies, you have to burn the bodies, and you have to get rid of them very quickly. There were little bits of that in the Zaitem fight, because it was still very relevant in that plot too, but they never really went into it too well, and I hope they do here. Amid the prejudice and the hate towards Sylvari, and the fear against the Sylvari, and all the racism that we should experience when we're playing as those classes, and even when we're not, these kinds of tones to the story are exactly what I'm looking for. So yeah, overall, I liked a lot what I heard about the Mordrem Guard. The final thing that they announced really was that there were 3 big Mordrem Guard commanders. We've already seen one, and that's Diarmid in the beta. This was the one that assaulted the fallen members of one of the Pact airships that held the Quaggan. It was said that the name is absolutely decided on. Now, some of you guys watching the points of interest might have thought, why did they take the time to tell us that the name is decided on? Well, here's why. Because it's a Sylvari, obviously, that has now turned to Mordremoth, called Diarmid. And a lot of people then realized that in Guild Wars 2 right now, in Divinity's Reach, is another Sylvari called Diarmid. And so people are thinking, oh, is that Sylvari from Divinity's Reach? And in the future, they get corrupted. It's just ArenaNet messed up and there's a typo of some kind. A lot of us have been openly thinking about that. And on the POI, they specifically say, yeah, no, the name is final. I guess then suggesting subtly that this isn't a typo. It's just a different character. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, they did say that there are 3 Mordrem commanders. This, again, I'm viewing as a positive thing. Maybe I'm just in a good mood, but I like this. Some people might be thinking, oh, there's only 3. That's a sign of bad things to come, right? This could mean that the expansion's really short because there's only 3 guys and then we're going to go and kill Mordremoth, right? Well, no. Let's give them the benefit of a doubt for a second. We could have 12 hours worth of intense, riveting story that takes place in the mists while we travel alongside the Exalted to retrieve Saul D'Alessio. In theory. Right? Just because, there's only 3 commanders, that's fine. And honestly, look at the way that they handled Zaitan. Every couple of missions, there was the next big bad guy. Oh, this guy's an assassin that's been wiping out members of the Priory. This guy's someone you never heard about, but is also a big bad dude, and we need to kill him when we unleash the Searing. You guys will have seen that again in a video that I did just this week also. They introduced one after the other, after the other, after the other, and it got boring. In this, there are 3. And because they're constantly being cloned and recreated, you can kill them multiple times and they'll just keep returning. They've got really fantastic design, physically, and I think these are good signs, again, that the story could genuinely really deliver. Fingers crossed. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about in today's news video is the Forge leak. Now, I've left this to the end in case you guys want to skip. I mean, tomorrow we'll get all the details anyway. But supposedly, one of the websites that was supposed to be revealing the information for the Forge accidentally pushed a localized version of that information, breaking NDA, putting up early, for a period of about 5 minutes. But someone caught it while it was online and downloaded a few things. Specifically, this was Naxo RG on Reddit. They say from their translation that there wasn't really too much information, but they heard about a skill called Rocket Charge, which is a multiple leap. We do know they can do multiple leap finishes on skills with some of the warrior traits that we already see in the game. A multiple leap, which deals damage. Shock Shield, which is a block. Thunderclap. Thunderclap was a Guild Wars 1 Elementalist skill. I actually speculated that the Tempest may get that skill. And Thunderclap will damage and stun enemies, also leaving a lightning field. And as you can see here, actually, we get an image of Thunderclap being used against some Jotun. No doubt this information will appear tomorrow. And then lastly, for the utility skills, they were labeled as functional gyroscopes. Don't forget, this is a localization translation, so it might end up different. But this seems to work around limited fuel, That, again, yesterday I speculated about the idea of, you know, some kind of charging bar unique mechanic so that rage skills could work with it and charge the mechanic. And, you know, maybe that would work, but so we have some kind of limited fuel, and these gyroscopes would be the drones that we've all been talking about. And you can see a few different varieties here as well. They still look like passive things that might buff the Forge up. And then lastly, actually, the title of the post wasn't introducing the Forge, it was introducing the Scrapper, which I would be much more happy with as an elite specialization name. A forge is an object, all right? At least make it Forge Smith or Master Forger or something like that, not just Forge on its own, right? Scrapper's pretty good. I'd prefer that than, you know, what the data mining so far has revealed. But there you go, guys. That's the news for today. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely a lot more information on the Scrapper, potentially, or the Forge coming right up. Let me know what you think about the Mordrem Guard stuff. Am I being too nice now? I rag on the personal story a lot, and I really want to see Hearthstone do things well, and I'm seeing a lot of evidence it might. Maybe that's just me, though. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.